Number 9. Mariah Logan. After spending 3 days in Miami with her friends for spring break in 2019, 23-year-old Mariah Logan decided to bid the city farewell by hanging out of the passenger window and yelling, "Bye, Miami," on her way to the airport. But Logan never caught her plane back to Chicago. She fell out the window and was fatally struck by a Range Rover. The driver initially stopped, but fled the scene before police arrived, sparking a homicide investigation. Meanwhile, the 3 gal pals who were in the car with Logan called her boyfriend, Roy Olden, to give him the tragic news. It was clear when he spoke with the Miami Herald that he was broken by his girlfriend's unexpected death. He said that the couple had the next 5 years of their future planned out when Logan's life was cut short. The young woman's travel companions were equally distraught and reportedly threw themselves onto the pavement in disbelief as investigators combed the highway for the driver of the Range Rover that hit and killed Logan. There are no leads, and the suspect is currently still at large. Number 8. Brittany Drexel. In 2009, 17-year-old Brittany Drexel left her home in Rochester, New York for a spring break trip in South Carolina without telling her mom. Dawn Drexel had already told her daughter that she couldn't travel with her friends to Myrtle Beach, but the teen went anyway. A few days into the vacation, Brittany left the hotel her group was staying at to visit a friend about 1.5 miles, 2.4 kilometers away. Surveillance footage would later show that she entered the resort and left a little while later. Shortly after that, Brittany stopped texting her boyfriend, John Greco. He grew concerned and called her friends to check on her. They didn't know where she was, so Greco called Brittany's mom, Dawn, and she got the authorities involved. Police determined that the young woman's cell phone last pinged in the early morning after her disappearance between 50 and 60 miles, 80 and 97 kilometers south of Myrtle Beach, before the device abruptly went dead. They interviewed a nightclub promoter but were unable to classify him as a suspect or rule him out. Dawn moved to the area so that she could actively search for Brittany, whom she suspected had fallen victim to human trafficking. The FBI, on the other hand, concluded that she was probably murdered and offered a $25,000 reward for information solving the case. 2 jailhouse informants claimed that they saw her being abused at the home of a man named Timothy Taylor. They claimed that Taylor had initially tried selling Brittany to traffickers but decided to kill her when her missing persons case gained widespread attention. He was never charged, despite failing a polygraph test. Last year, Taylor's mother told the press that she wants people to stop associating her son's name with Brittany's disappearance, arguing that there's no compelling evidence against him in the case. Number 7. A drug-induced debacle. Earlier this year, 6 cadets from the prestigious West Point Military Academy ended up in the hospital from drug overdoses while spending their spring break in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Police and emergency responders rushed to the group's vacation rental after receiving a call about 6 people who had ingested cocaine laced with fentanyl, a powerful painkiller between 50 and 100 times stronger than heroin. When officers arrived at the scene, there were multiple people in cardiac arrest, including at least 2 who needed CPR and at least 1 who was in critical condition, according to Fort Lauderdale Police Chief Stephen Gollan, who spoke with Local 10 News. First responders administered Narcan to reverse the deadly drug's effects. 2 of the emergency workers also got sick from exposure to the fentanyl and required medical treatment. The cadets were taken to the hospital, and a West Point spokesperson told CNN that the academy was investigating the incident. Local authorities used the disturbing event as an opportunity to remind spring breakers of the dangers associated with fentanyl and to caution the public against mixing drugs and alcohol. Police arrested 21-year-old Axel Giovanni Cassius, the alleged drug dealer who's accused of selling the deadly cocaine to the West Point cadets, and several others who overdosed during spring break this year. Number 6. Aiden Navarez. Like many other college students, 18-year-old Arizona State University freshman Aiden Navarez traveled to Mexico for spring break this year. He went to Cabo with some classmates, where they stayed at the hotel Rio Santa Fe. Just hours after checking in, Navarez accidentally fell off a wall and plummeted to his death. The 20-foot, 6.1 meters wall looked deceptively short, according to ASU student Jake Reithinger, who was at the hotel when Aiden died. Speaking with local news station Arizona's Family, Reithinger explained that from a certain angle, the wall only appeared to be about knee-high, and the tops of palm trees that can be seen next to it looked more like bushes or shrubs. In other words, Navarez had no idea how tall the wall was or the risks he was taking near it. The teen's death was ruled an accident. It's unclear whether he had drugs or alcohol in his system when he fell. Number 5. Dorian Taylor and Yvonne Collier. A 24-year-old Pennsylvania woman named Christine Engelhardt was partying in Miami during spring break last year when she accidentally overdosed on the deadly drug fentanyl. It happened after she met two men from North Carolina named Dorian Taylor and Yvonne Collier and went back to their South Beach hotel room with them. Engelhardt was pronounced dead after being found unresponsive in her hotel room. Just days later, a 21-year-old tourist from Chicago named Walter Riley died from an overdose after obtaining drugs from the same two men who had provided them to Christine. Riley was found unconscious in the street and was soon pronounced dead. A grand jury quickly indicted Taylor and Collier on a slew of charges, including first-degree murder, burglary, and sexual battery. The pair are accused of killing Engelhardt and Riley by giving them deadly opioids. They also allegedly raped Christine while she was incapacitated and then stole her credit cards, which they used to buy liquor. The accused are maintaining their innocence. Collier's lawyer, Phil Reisenstein, reportedly told the Miami Herald that, according to the medical examiner's report, Christine had so many drugs in her system when she died that it was difficult to discern exactly what killed her. But according to the arrest report, the Miami-Dade medical examiner determined that a green pill the men had given Christine contained a so-called rapidly fatal dose of fentanyl. The autopsy also revealed that the young woman's blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit when she died, and that asphyxia may have played a role in her death. Number 4. Heather Miller. Unlike many college students, 21-year-old Heather Miller decided against participating in rowdy spring break festivities during her senior year at West Virginia University in 2008. She was invited on a trip to Texas with her girlfriends, but instead, she returned to her hometown of Wheeling with plans to spend time with her family and play video games with her 2 brothers and her sister. One night during her visit, Heather went out with some friends with plans to stay overnight at one of their homes. In the early morning hours, someone rang her parents' doorbell. At first, they thought Heather had changed her mind and came home. But the couple were met by 2 deputies who delivered some unexpected bad news. Their daughter had been in a car accident and was rushed to the hospital. On their way to the emergency room, Heather's parents passed the scene of the crash. During a 2015 interview with WeLunk.com, her mother Jody said that this was the precise moment when she just knew that her daughter had not survived. The young woman had been a passenger in a vehicle driven by her 22-year-old friend, Justin Kearns, who walked away with minor injuries. Heather, on the other hand, died from her injuries. Her mom and dad received the news after arriving at the hospital and being put into a separate waiting room by themselves, which they took as another bad sign. The unfortunate tragedy proves that things can go terribly awry at any place and at any time, including when someone makes the seemingly safe and smart choice to stay close to home during spring break. Investigators suspected that alcohol played a role in the crash, prompting Jody to become a citizen volunteer who works at DUI checkpoints. Number 3. California crash. In 2018, 3 Las Vegas teens named A.J. Rossi, Dylan Mack, and Brooke Hawley traveled to Southern California for spring break. The 3 were driving around at 1 in the morning with another friend when their car was suddenly rear-ended on the Pacific Coast Highway. They were pushed into an intersection and their car burst into flames. The unnamed passenger managed to escape, but the other 3 were trapped in the blaze. Unfortunately, it was too late for police to save their lives, and they perished at the scene. Police arrested 27-year-old Barney Duarte, who was driving the vehicle that fatally struck the Toyota that the teens were traveling in. Huntington Beach resident Alex Martinez told the Orange County Register that he and his friends noticed Duarte driving erratically shortly before the deadly crash. They were on their way home from the gym when they saw the woman swerving and hitting curbs. The diligent civilians trailed Duarte's vehicle while they called the police. At one point, the friends caught up to the woman and asked if she was okay, pointing out that she had just hit several sidewalks. She reportedly acted confused in response, but Duarte declined their offer for a ride home and continued to drive, leading to the tragic deaths of the innocent teens she rammed her car into. Number 2. Drowning disaster. This year's spring break season has been marked by numerous tragedies. One of the first to hit headlines was the accidental drowning of a 22-year-old American woman in Cancun. Details on the incident are scarce. According to media reports, the victim was pulled from the water, where she had become caught in the tide. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, though, it was too late to save her life, and she was declared dead. The woman, whose identity was never disclosed, was reportedly with her boyfriend when she got swept out to sea. It's unknown whether there were any active red flag warnings against swimming in the area of the water that she chose to enter. A red flag would have indicated that water conditions were dangerous and represents an advisory against going swimming. When the heartbreaking story made headlines, the woman's cause of death had not yet been officially announced. The tragedy happened just weeks after a Paraguayan tourist disappeared during a red flag warning. At the time of publishing, his body had not yet been recovered, but it was widely assumed that he drowned. The Weather Channel recently published an article reminding spring breakers not to let riptides ruin their fun in the sun and advising vacationers on what to do if they find themselves stuck in one. Knowing what to do in a situation like this can absolutely save someone, as some tourists have unfortunately learned the hard way by seeing someone they care about lose their life. Number 1. Miami Mayhem. Miami is known for being a party city year-round, but things escalated to a whole new level recently when the city declared a state of emergency after 5 spring breakers were shot over the course of just 2 days. This year's spring break saw an influx of overwhelming crowds in Miami Beach. Vacationers flooded the streets and violence erupted. Police became exhausted trying to control the chaos as they scrambled to rescue one shooting victim after another. 4 officers were also injured amid the craziness. The cops were left feeling exhausted, according to a Facebook post by the Miami Beach Fraternal Order of Police, urging local officials to take action. After a weekend of mayhem, City Manager Alina Hudak announced that a curfew was being imposed, starting on Thursday of that week and lasting until the following Monday. Starting just after midnight every night, people were expected to go inside, and anyone hoping for lax enforcement was in for a disappointment. Hudak made it clear that police would be patrolling South Beach to make sure that spring breakers were abiding by the rule. But the curfew was mostly ignored, and hundreds of vacationers were arrested as the revelry and crime continued. In addition to the shootings, suspects were charged with a slew of other crimes, including sexual battery, theft, fraud, and more. It soon became clear that not everyone who got in trouble was on spring break, but that the college crowds had become mixed with party-hardy adults who eagerly contributed to the problems.
10. Rampage at Gold's Gym. In October of 2011, a New York weightlifter entered a Gold's Gym and went on a terrifying rampage. His name was Chad Brothers, 32 years old. He walked into the gym, started trashing the place, and then had a heart attack after the cops used a taser on him to quell his violent frenzy. According to Police Chief Stephen Hayter, Chad had attacked a female officer and assaulted a gym goer. And the only way to settle the hulking mania was with a shock of electricity. But let's back things up to the start. The police were initially called after Chad punched a man who was running on a treadmill. The guy was literally just minding his own business, and Chad went up and socked him. He then lost his mind, started destroying weight machines, throwing office equipment around, and chucking dumbbells across the room. When a female officer showed up and realized she was dealing with a man hopped up on steroids, she had no choice but to jolt him with a taser. But even after being hit once, Chad didn't slow down. Multiple officers had to shoot him with their tasers, shocking him 4 or 5 times and beating him with a baton before he was finally subdued. Now, nobody gets hit with a taser that many times without some serious damage. Once he was subdued, the cops rushed him to Albany Medical Center, but he died from cardiac arrest at 7:15 in the morning. Nobody knows what triggered the incident, but experts believe steroids had thrown him into an angry delirium. 9. Tearing a muscle. At the beginning of 2021, Ryan Big Rig Crowley had one of the worst days at the gym ever. The winner's pectoral muscle tore right off his bone. Ouch! He didn't just tear his muscle, it literally detached itself from his skeleton. Ryan and his friend Larry Wheels, also a power lifter, were pumping iron at a local gym in Dubai when they started egging each other on. Ryan amped himself up and added an extra 88 pounds to his bench press, totaling a weight of 485 pounds. That extra huge chunk of weight was just too much for his body to handle. He tore his muscle on video right in the middle of his bench press. In the disturbing footage, you can even see Ryan's pectoral tendon jutting out of his skin from where it had been ripped off the bone. He collapsed on the floor in agony and was rushed to the hospital. His whole arm was covered in bruises, all the way down his torso. This wasn't an injury that Ryan could just walk away from. Doctors had to completely reconstruct his pec, and it will take a considerable amount of time to recover. 8. Carjacking gone wrong. In June of 2021, a grandmother was shot and killed outside a Houston gym as she was trying to walk in the front door. 2 suspects ambushed 62-year-old Elsa Mikiska as she arrived for her 5 o'clock exercise class. It was the first thing in the morning, the sun was still down, and these 2 scumbags were lurking in the parking lot, waiting to rob somebody. They had driven up in a white Chevrolet SUV just before 5 o'clock, then waited for the grandmother to get out of her vehicle. It was just supposed to be a robbery, but when Elsa realized what was happening, she bolted for the front doors. The thieves were caught by surprise, and they opened fire on her, filling her with bullets before she could even enter the gym. The tragedy shook the community to its core and positively devastated Elsa's family. The 2 suspects got away at first, but were quickly apprehended and have since been charged with capital murder. Both of the suspects were juveniles. One was just 16 years old. Regardless of their age, both are likely to spend their entire adult lives locked behind bars. 7. Dead and missing. In late January of 2022, a young woman in California said she was going to the gym. It was the last time she was ever seen alive. According to the Oceanside Police Department, Sarah Otero, 28 years old, was last seen early in the morning on January 28th. She left her mother's house claiming she was going to meet a friend and work out together. But when she never returned home and her parents reached out to the friend, they said they were unaware of plans. The family was a little panicked, but hoping their daughter had maybe just taken some time for herself down at the beach. When she didn't show up for work later on, something she had never done, her family was immediately worried. They called the police and reported her missing. 2 weeks after she vanished, Sarah's body was found. Police first discovered her vehicle at a greasy rest stop on Interstate 5. When they searched the area, they uncovered her corpse at the bottom of a cliff. which happens to be in a restricted training area of a Marine Corps base camp. Here's where things get really strange. The Oceanside police claim that they found nothing suspicious about her death when all the facts we have point to something extremely suspicious going on. First of all, the friend she was supposed to go to the gym with. Why did she lie about it? Or was it the friend that was lying? And another thing, Sarah was in a romantic relationship with someone she had only met over Zoom calls. This is also a little weird. The police may not suspect foul play, but it seems unlikely that Sarah lied about going to the gym only to fall off the edge of a cliff near an interstate bathroom. 6. Crushed by a barbell. During the Christmas season of 2016, Kyle Thompson, a man of just 22 years old, went to the gym to work out in central Iowa. He frequented the Elite Edge Transformation Center in Ankeny, about 10 miles from Des Moines. It was an ordinary Monday morning and Kyle was working out with a barbell. Everything went terribly wrong in the blink of an eye when the barbell slipped from his hand and crushed his neck. Mark Yance, a spokesman for the gym, said in a statement that Kyle was bench pressing 315 pounds at the time of the accident. There had been people spotting the Iowa State University student when the barbell slipped, but none of them were fast enough to grab the bar before it landed on his throat. They were able to get the thing off him, but the damage had already been done. An ambulance was called and Kyle was taken to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead from his injuries. That much weight falling directly on his throat was just too devastating to come back from. It was like an elephant stepping on his neck. And it wasn't even like he didn't know what he was doing. Kyle was a sharp guy. He was fit. He knew exactly how to properly work out. It was simply a freak accident, a horrible thing that could honestly happen to anyone. 5. Brutal security guard assault. A security guard at a gym in Mesquite, Texas, was just doing his job when he ended up dead. According to the police, 43-year-old Patrick Prejean got into a physical altercation with a group of men at the gym in January of 2022. It happened at a fitness connection on Town East Boulevard. We don't know exactly what the pair were arguing about, but it got extremely heated. Witnesses say 3 men attacked the security guard and beat him viciously, to the point where he was lying unresponsive on the floor. The trio took off running, bystanders called the police, and Patrick was whisked to the hospital. Sadly, he died from his injuries. The police investigation led them to 3 men in their 20s, all from Georgia. All 3 have also been charged with murder, but we have no motive as to why they did what they did. The security guard was described as a gentle giant by his friends, a lovable man who had never done anything mean to anyone. It appears he had been trying to keep the peace at the gym with 3 cruel ruffians who were jacked up on testosterone and resorted to violence. The only gym these 3 young men will be visiting now is the one in prison, where they won't be the only ones jacked up on testosterone. 4. Murdered by the homeless. Matthew Hurley was the manager of a gym in Montana who found himself in an argument with a homeless man in September of 2021. Matthew and his assistant manager at Fuel Fitness and Nutrition confronted a man who appeared to be homeless and sleeping in their parking lot on a Thursday morning. According to the assistant manager, also named Matthew, the homeless man began to complain about an unused gym membership that he wanted a refund for. Even though they were under absolutely no obligation to give him a refund for this apparent gym membership he owned, they did it anyway. That's the kind of good person and great manager Matthew Hurley was. But the homeless man didn't end things at the refund. After he got his money, he demanded more. He told Matthew and Matthew that he needed more cash and that no wasn't an option. When Matthew Hurley said no and that more money was going beyond what he was willing to do, things got dark, fast. Without hesitation, the homeless man said, "Okay, then you're going to die." He pulled out a gun and started shooting. Matthew was hit, but the assistant manager managed to run away to safety. A bystander who heard the shots ran to their vehicle and retrieved a firearm and got into a shootout with the homeless man. It was absolute anarchy. The bystander got shot, but so did the suspect. Both were taken to hospital, and Hurley was declared dead at the scene. 3. The horrible butchering of Molly McLaren. Molly McLaren was the tragic victim of an extreme act of wickedness. What happened to Molly should quite frankly never happen to anyone. She was butchered by her ex-boyfriend as she sat in her car on June 27, 2018. She wasn't just stabbed a little. Her crazed boyfriend, Joshua Stimson, knifed her 75 times in an outburst of uncontrollable mania. Molly had been working out at the gym when Joshua approached her. He had been stalking Molly ever since they split up 12 days previously. Molly was horrified that he had followed her to the gym, and so she quickly packed up her stuff and headed out to the parking lot. It was 10:45 in the morning. The very last thing she did was sit in her car and text her friends. She texted her mother saying that Joshua turned up at the gym and that she was scared. She also messaged some of her friends explaining the horror she was dealing with. What she didn't know was that Joshua was waiting with a pair of knives and a pickaxe. Joshua had been watching her from his own vehicle. When he saw his opportunity, he ran at her car, yanked open the door, and started stabbing. Molly tried to fight him off, but there was nothing she could do against the flurry of knife blows. She screamed, honked her horn, and was dead in minutes. There was no getting away for Joshua Stimson. He was arrested and brought to jail. At his trial, it took less than 3 hours for the jury to convict him of murder. He was given a sentence of 26 years. Although, considering the circumstances, it doesn't seem like enough. 2. Crushed in Mexico. A woman in Mexico City was crushed to death by a 400-pound barbell. As if getting crushed by an extremely heavy bar of metal isn't terrible enough, it happened right in front of her young daughter. According to the New York Post, the 42-year-old mom was working out on a Monday at Fitness Sport in February of 2022. Just before she got in position, a large man had adjusted the plates on the barbell. The woman sat down on the bench, tried to lift the barbell, and immediately lost control of it. It fell from her hands and crushed her neck, snapping her head forward and killing her on the spot while her daughter screamed in horror. She was dead instantly, but her daughter and those nearby still struggled to get the barbell off her neck and perform basic first aid. What's really strange is that the woman dressed in a sweatshirt with her hair down didn't look like she was prepared to lift a whopping 400 pounds above her head. We don't know if she was unaware of how much weight was on the bar, if the man who had stacked the weight knew that she couldn't handle it, or what. Authorities in Mexico say the accident is still under investigation. 1. Snapped leg. It was in March of 2017 when a man snapped his knee on a leg press machine in the middle of his workout. Somebody was filming this guy at an Indian gym as he pushed hundreds of pounds on the leg press. It was pretty impressive. He was moving a lot of weight, and then his body decided to quit. His leg bent back the wrong way and snapped like someone had dropped a huge stone on a brittle twig. The victim was identified as Ambrish Patel, a regular at the gym. An employee of the gym said that after the incident, Ambrish was actually doing quite okay. He couldn't work out anymore, and it would take him 6 months to fully heal, but he should have normal use of his legs. That's extremely good news, considering just how bad this could have been.
Number 9. Ashley Judd. Ashley Judd has carved out a comfortable living as a high-profile actress, but in her spare time, she's a passionate activist who's eager to trade the glitz and glam of Hollywood for a much more modest existence as she works to make the world a better place. Last year, the starlet traveled to the Democratic Republic of Congo to do some conservation work in the remote bonobo peace forest, which is home to an endangered primate called the bonobo. Things took an unexpected turn for Ashley, though, when she tripped over a fallen tree and broke her leg. She laid on the forest floor for 5 hours while awaiting rescue, and that was just the beginning of what turned out to be a harrowing 55-hour journey to safety. Once help arrived, her Congolese friend reset her leg bone without anesthesia, causing her to go into shock and lose consciousness from the excruciating pain. A group of acquaintances then carried Judd back to their camp on a hammock. From there, she was transported to the city of Jolu on a motorcycle. Then she took a helicopter to the capital city of Kinshasa. Judd was then flown to a hospital in South Africa, where she received treatment in an intensive care unit. The altruistic actress posted a video on social media expressing her gratitude towards those who helped her access services that most locals themselves cannot afford. 6 months after the accident, the media reported that she was walking again. Number 8. A frozen nightmare. Located among the scenic slopes of a volcano in Russia's remote Kamchatka Peninsula, Vilyachinsky waterfall attracts visitors year-round. It's fed by the pristine waters of a nearby melting glacier. During the winter, the 130-foot, 40 meters cascade of water freezes into a collection of massive icicles. It's an absolutely beautiful sight, but things can quickly get ugly if you get too close to it, as one group of tourists recently learned. During a visit to the site earlier this year, a group of 7 visitors and their guide became perilously trapped in ice after massive icicles broke off and fell from the frozen waterfall. At least one person was killed. Several were pulled back from the scene by quick-thinking bystanders, including a gravely wounded child. 4 people were left trapped as they awaited rescue. The government dispatched a helicopter to the scene, along with a team of more than 40 medics, investigators, and rescuers. At the time of reporting, 2 adults and a seriously injured child had been flown to the hospital. Emergency responders worked tirelessly to dig the remaining stranded tourists out from beneath the ice. An investigation into the cause of the catastrophic collapse is ongoing. Number 7. White Island eruption. Located off New Zealand's North Island in the Bay of Plenty, White Island is an active volcano and a popular tourist attraction. Naturally, this kind of tourism comes with risks. But experts monitor seismic activity in the area so that they can warn the public of any dangers, which is exactly what they did in late 2019 when they raised the volcano's alert level. Unfortunately, tour companies failed to heed the caution and continued to take visitors to White Island. 2 weeks after the alert was issued, the volcano explosively erupted, spewing rock and ash into the air and killing 22 of the 47 people who were on the island at the time. 25 others were seriously injured, with most of them receiving intensive care for severe burns. American newlyweds Lauren Barham and Matthew Urey, who visited during their honeymoon cruise, described seeing nothing but pitch black as they took cover behind a rock in a desperate attempt to avoid the scalding ash and smoke. They suffered disfiguring burns and were placed in medically induced comas while they underwent skin grafts and reconstructive surgeries. The Ureys accused the cruise line and tour company of falsely advertising high safety standards and failing to prevent a needless catastrophe. And they're not the only ones who feel this way. In addition to facing numerous civil lawsuits, several companies and individuals are facing criminal charges for their alleged responsibility in the tragic disaster. Number 6. Bus crash in Bulgaria. A group of more than 50 tourists were riding through Bulgaria on their way back to North Macedonia after a trip to Turkey late last year, when their bus crashed into a barrier and erupted into flames. The accident happened along the Struma motorway near the village of Bosnak in the early morning hours. 7 people who jumped out of the vehicle were injured but survived. 45 others suffocated in the blaze, with their lifeless bodies turning to charcoal by the time the fire was extinguished. They were burned beyond recognition, making it extremely difficult to identify their remains. It was one of the deadliest bus accidents in the country's recent history and the deadliest European crash in the last decade. While the cause of the accident remains unclear, investigators believe that human error was responsible. Bulgarian Prime Minister Stefan Yanev was one of many politicians from different countries who expressed their dismay at the loss of life. He called on the public to learn lessons from the tragic incident to prevent such incidents in the future. Number 5. Gunfire in Paradise. Tourists were enjoying themselves on the pristine sands of Cancun late last year when a group of men pulled up on jet skis and began firing bullets into the air. The beachgoers ran for cover, and thankfully nobody was injured. Rick Labasa, who was visiting from Maine, told NBC5 that in 31 years of vacationing in Cancun, it was the first time he had ever seen an incident like this. He took a surprisingly nonchalant attitude toward the ordeal, explaining that because he had never experienced any issues before, he wasn't overly concerned about it. But not everyone was left unshaken by the random display of gunfire. A pair of tourists from Minnesota named Andy Gyrich and Kerry Arms described the moment they scrambled for safety while watching panicked, screaming and crying guests do the same. Police found and seized the jet skis, but the criminals remained at large. The disturbing incident came amid a noticeable uptick in violence along Mexico's resort-lined Caribbean coast, which had gotten bad enough for the military to be called in to help protect the area. Just weeks earlier, members of a drug gang had stormed the nearby beach at Puerto Morelos and opened fire outside luxury hotels, killing 2 rival gang members. Sadly, these life-threatening encounters are becoming more frequent as cartels fight for control over the area's highly profitable drug trade. But the violence is tarnishing the region's reputation for safety and tranquility, which is what draws so many visitors in the first place. In that sense, the warring drug dealers are risking driving away their own customer base. Number 4. Table Rock Lake Tragedy. The DUKW, or duck boat, is an amphibious vehicle that was used by the US and its allies during World War II and the Korean War. After the boats were taken out of service, they became popular in several cities as a fun way to show tourists around. But there have been numerous fatal accidents involving duck boats, leading many to question whether they should be allowed to operate. The latest tragedy to call the vehicle's safety into question came in 2018 when a duck boat entered Table Rock Lake in the Missouri Ozarks despite a severe thunderstorm warning in the area. By then, winds had already hit 60 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour, causing 3-foot, 1-meter waves. Within minutes, the vehicle began to sink as passengers desperately tried to escape. 17 people between the ages of 1 and 70 years old died. Tia Coleman, who lost 9 family members in the accident, told investigators that the crew had told passengers not to wear life jackets because they wouldn't need them. The boat's captain, Kenneth Scott McKee, was accused of failing to properly assess the weather before setting out on the lake. In 2020, a judge dismissed federal charges relating to McKee's alleged role in the tragedy. Determined to achieve justice for the victims, state authorities charged the captain and 2 other employees with 17 counts of involuntary manslaughter last July. The defendants asked a judge to dismiss the charges, arguing a lack of probable cause. They'll find out sometime this year if they'll face a criminal trial. Number 3. Stranded in a snowstorm. Located in northern Pakistan, the mountainside resort town of Murree attracts more tourists than it can handle, often leaving officials with no other choice than to limit how many vehicles are allowed to enter. Shortly into the new year, an estimated 100,000 or more visitors flocked to Murree to catch a glimpse of the winter snowfall, and for some reason, authorities failed to regulate the traffic. The town's streets became unbearably congested as a traffic jam formed on the outskirts. Thousands of cars became stranded, bumper to bumper as a blizzard pounded the region with 5 feet (1.5 meters) of snow in just a few hours and knocked trees into the roads. Many tourists abandoned their vehicles and sought shelter at guest houses and any other warm buildings that would welcome them. Others languished in their cars without much needed food, warmth, and medical care. Emergency workers struggled to reach the scene as they found themselves caught in the traffic jams. The government summoned the military to Murray, but by the time help came, it was too late to save the 22 people who died in the disaster. Most of the individuals who perished froze to death, while some asphyxiated from inhaling toxic exhaust fumes. It took the military 2 days to rescue all the stranded survivors and fully clear the roads. Many survivors were left wondering why authorities allowed the mass stranding to happen. They reported receiving no emergency weather warnings and said that they thought it was perfectly safe to travel to Murray. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan and the Punjab provincial government ordered an investigation into the ordeal to determine whether there was a failure to issue extreme weather warnings to the public or to regulate traffic coming into Murray. Number 2. Crushed in a canal. When a 50-year-old German law professor named Joachim Vogel and his wife took their 3 kids on a family trip to Venice in 2013, the last thing they expected was to go home with one less family member. But that's unfortunately what happened after a leisurely gondola ride through the city's canals turned deadly. The small boat collided with a water bus, or vaporetto, and Vogel was crushed to death. An investigation found traces of cocaine and marijuana in the gondolier's blood, but his handling of the boat did not appear to be a factor in the accident. Vogel's widow claimed that the larger vessel's operator didn't even notice when it hit the gondola her family was riding in. She questioned why there wasn't an extra pair of eyes at the stern, or why the boat wasn't equipped with more mirrors and cameras for safe maneuvering. It took a tragedy for officials to realize that traffic among the Venetian waterways desperately needed stricter oversight, especially as increased tourism clogged the canals more than ever before. Former city-appointed gondolier representative Aldo Rosso told The Guardian he was surprised that a deadly accident like this hadn't happened sooner. He went on to say that people do whatever they want on the canals. The city's mayor, Giorgio Orsoni, was quick to crack down on the congestion problem. Less than a month after Vogel was killed, Orsoni proposed 26 new measures to prevent more needless tragedies from happening, including drug and alcohol tests for boat handlers, an increased police presence, and a cutback on the number of gondolas that are allowed in the parts of the canal that tend to be the most crowded. Not everyone agreed on who was at fault for congestion in the canals. Gondoliers accused vaporetto operators of traveling at unsafe speeds and failing to pay enough attention to the presence of smaller boats. Vaporetto operators claimed that gondoliers get in the way without any consideration for other vessels. Thankfully, there haven't been any similar fatal crashes since the collision that claimed Vogel's life. Number 1. Egaltismen. A honeymoon is supposed to mark the beginning of a lifetime of wedded bliss, but for newlyweds Shia Frankel and Egaltismen, the experience proved to be life-shattering. After tying the knot in 2018, the couple took a Caribbean cruise on the allure of the seas. Their fun came to a screeching halt during a ziplining excursion at a port stop in Honduras when Frankel got stuck on the line. Unable to stop on time, her husband crashed into her and died. The tragedy came amid a slew of allegations about unsafe conditions from others who had been injured on the ziplining excursion. They accused Royal Caribbean of failing to disclose that the activity was run by a separate company and falsely advertising top-notch safety standards. Past incidents revealed a troubling history marked by faulty brake systems, poor visibility, and poor communication among staff members between platforms. Several people crashed into platforms, in some cases resulting in gruesome injuries that exposed bone, muscle, and tendon. Other cases involved zipliners slamming into each other, often because there were too many people on the line at the same time. In one incident, 15 people got stuck on the line before employees even realized that something was wrong. Frankel sued Royal Caribbean for over $1 million in damages, but no amount of money could bring her husband back or heal the emotional wounds from his loss. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get stranded in a traffic jam for 3 days straight or endure a 10-hour flight with no bathroom? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.